The Canadians didn't like that, and they fired the first official shot of the American-Canadian War. That's an act of war.
Imagine a mob boss moves in next door and starts making jokes about harming your family and taking your stuff. Really funny jokes like your TV would go great in my living room, and if anything ever happened to you, I take real good care of your wife. How do you respond? Oh gosh, you're funny, mister. Or this is unhinged, get away from me. This is what it feels like to be a Canadian right now, as the US government threatens, belittles, and insults us almost every day.
And to be honest with you, Canada only works as a state. We don't need anything they have. What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state.
A mere difference of opinion. That's how America's top diplomat described ongoing threats to violate Canadian sovereignty.
There's a disagreement between the president's position and the position of the Canadian government.
One G7 member is threatening the very existence of another.
Meanwhile, damn, Canadians really can't take a joke. People, you can't tell when he's trolling? Stop falling for his trolls. This is extremely funny, he's just trolling everyone. Obviously he's joking, does nobody have a sense of humor? It's not just MAGA supporters who refuse to take this man seriously or even hold him to the basic standards expected of a toddler.
Absolutely. If somebody doesn't understand the multi-dimensional chess that he's playing.
It's also regular establishment journalists denying and downplaying. Nobody is invading you, man. Calm the f down. The worst case scenario is a catastrophic trade war where we all suffer. I'll tell you what, if Donald Trump invades Canada, I'll come here and personally apologize to all the people frothing at me now. Feel better? No! Donald Trump is 100% serious about wanting to take over Canada and make us into a state. The methods he'll use to achieve that are an open question, but he's totally serious about the desire. Here's how we know. Number 1, he's been repeating the threat for months. This isn't a one-off brain fart, it's dozens of times. Making Canada the quote-unquote 51st state is a strong and recurring preoccupation for him.
Canada was meant to be the 51st state. So when I say they should be a state, I mean that. I really mean that.
Number 2, his aides say he's completely serious and to take him at his word.
Sources are telling NBC News today that Trump's aides believe that he is serious about his desire, he's vocalized it, to make Canada the 51st state.
Number 3, Canadian politicians also say he's serious.
The Americans want our resources, our water, our land, our country.
Number 4, he's questioned the legitimacy of our border, calling it an artificial line.
If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it. Just a straight artificial line. Makes no sense. Artificial line that looks like it was done with a ruler. And that's what it was. Some guy sat there years ago and they said, "Rah."
That's how you talk about countries that you want to take over. It's very different from how he talks about other borders, like the US-Mexico one.
Build that wall. 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 Trust me, Mexico will pay for it.
Number 5, he's narcissistic and loves putting his name on big things. Is there any bigger real estate deal than doubling the landmass of the USA and creating the biggest country in the world?
This would be the most incredible country visually.
Number 6, subjugating neighboring countries fits into his worldview of great powers dominating and plundering their spheres of influence rather than international cooperation and respect. Number 7, he's talked about bringing back Manifest Destiny, which is territorial expansion of the US in the 1800s, and also promised to take territory from countries like Denmark and Panama.
The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory.
Donald Trump was asked about the elections in Greenland. The president said he was pretty confident the U.S. will eventually take over that country. Yes, he said that again.
They're reportedly developing plans to invade Mexico and Panama.
Donald Trump wants Canada, Greenland, and now he's directing the Pentagon to draw up military plans for the Panama Canal.
Number 8, figures that have influenced Trump like Pat Buchanan have been musing about taking over Canada and Greenland for decades. Trump's favorite past president, William McKinley, annexed multiple territories including Guam, Puerto Rico, and Hawaii.
William McKinley. William McKinley. William McKinley, highly underrated. Has not been properly recognized. William McKinley is an example. He was a big tariff president. He was a strong believer in tariffs.
Number 9, Trump admires Vladimir Putin and has sympathy for a big country being provoked into invading a smaller one. Ukraine needs to surrender in the name of peace. They shouldn't have started it.
But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
Number 10, they've created pretexts like Canada being controlled by Mexican drug cartels, sounding a lot like the Bush administration talking about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Saddam Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction.
Canada has been taken over, Brett, by Mexican cartels.
And so if you want to get the cartels out of the U.S., you got to get them out of Canada and Mexico.
The cartels are waging war in America, and it's time for America to wage war on the cartels.
Number 11, when Canada fights back in the trade war they started, they whine about how we're abusers attacking them, painting us as a hostile and threatening enemy.
The Ontario Premier threatened energy against America. You can't threaten.
But he was responding to what you did.
No.
The president saw the Premier, Doug Ford, make an egregious and insulting comment threatening to shut down electricity for the American people, for hardworking American families.
Quote, can you imagine Canada stooping so low as to use electricity that so affects the life of innocent people as a bargaining chip and threat? They will pay a financial price for this so big that it will be read about in history books for many years to come.
Just so we're clear, he repeats over and over that they don't need our energy or anything else we have.
We don't need them for anything. We don't need them for energy. We have more energy than they do. We don't need them for energy.
But Doug Ford applying a surcharge or talking about shutting off transmission is an act of war?
That's an act of war.
This is real domestic abuser behavior. Number 12, Trump lives in an information bubble and is absolutely capable of convincing himself that the small percentage of Canadians who actually want this are much more common than they are.
Does sound pretty good. America's neighbors to the north are hopping on the MAGA train. I've heard they call themselves Maple MAGAs.
And finally, number 13, this is a guy who has no morals, qualms, or standards. He'd cheat his own grandmother if it got him a better real estate deal.
And now, after using his Trump brand to sell everything from steaks and vodka to sneakers and Bibles, the president promoting his company's newly launched Trump meme coin.
I don't know much about it other than I launched it. I heard it was very successful.
Again, there's a difference between wanting to annex Canada and actually trying to achieve it with military force. As of now, the American public overwhelmingly does not approve of that, and there could also be pushback from the military and Congress. I'd like to think that this is so far beyond the pale that even Republicans would finally stand up to him, although I've been disappointed before.
100% I'm for this. Pardon every one of them. They've been there long enough.
What I'm saying is that his desire to take over Canada is 100% real, and the only question is how far he'll go to achieve that goal. And importantly, that's not limited by self-control or respect for sovereignty or norms. It's limited by politics and what he thinks he can get away with. He's currently waging an economic war on us with the repeated stated intention of ending our sovereignty. That's not a hypothetical. He's currently doing it because he can get away with it.
Just this morning, about our closest trading partner, he said that he's going to impose tariffs that will permanently shut down the Canadian car industry.
If you think, well, sure, he'll do that, but he'd never invade another country, what are you smoking? If you think it's totally implausible that he could try to mobilize public opinion for an attack, you're naive.
And we have to do this. I'm sorry, we have to do this, yes.
Maybe it's easy to brush off threats like this if you live in America and you can't even imagine your sovereignty being threatened. But for people in smaller countries, it hits harder. So, for example, if the Mexican government constantly made jokes about welcoming back the lost state of Texas, if France redeclared Louisiana an overseas department, or California was continuously claimed as a special administrative region of China, Americans would brush it off as harmless trolling. Except like hell they would. Even in the complete absence of material threat, Americans would be absolutely furious at these indignities, especially if repeated. They'd expel ambassadors. It would be a major diplomatic incident. But for some reason, Canada, Panama, and Denmark are expected to just brush this off because people don't hold Donald Trump to normal human standards. The President of the United States isn't supposed to troll the sovereignty of allies. The guy with the nukes isn't supposed to act like a 13-year-old on 4chan trying to rustle your jimmies. And we are under real threat. Even a 5 or 10% chance of Canada being invaded by the US is a really big deal. Like a 5 or 10% chance that your new mafioso neighbor actually kills you. Threats don't have to be higher than a 50% chance for you to take them seriously. Let's not only focus on the possibility of an invasion though. Trump's economic war on Canada is currently happening. People have already lost jobs.
Iveco, the industrial pride of Eastern Ontario, announcing layoffs in the wake of 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum.
Don't worry, he's not going to invade. He's just going to try to force you to give up your sovereignty through economic coercion. Isn't much of a consolation. That's insane. That's unprecedented in our modern history. How is this real life? How did 50% of Americans vote for this? You knew what he was. And while it's true that a trade war hurts Americans too, we all suffer glosses over the fact that, number one, this was started by their government with the repeated stated goal of ending our sovereignty, and number two, we're more vulnerable as a smaller country, more exposed to trade. Going back to the invasion threat, it's hard not to think of Ukraine here. In the first few weeks of 2022, when US intelligence was warning that Russia was planning a full-scale invasion, there was a ton of denial and disbelief. Honestly, I didn't think Russia would do it either. That's crazy, right? But they did it.
Ukraine is now a nation at war. Just hours ago, Russian forces began their attack.
Talking about the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine.
I'll never forget watching the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in real time. It was the evening of February 23rd for us. I remember watching Ukraine's airspace close on flight radar. I remember seeing explosions on webcams in places like Mariupol. I had a hard time sleeping that night. I've followed the war pretty closely ever since, from Azovstal to Kursk, and it's taught me one big lesson about the way things like this operate. Deny, then justify. Deny an accusation or potential action, then later justify it once it's happened or become undeniable or you know you can get away with it. In 2014, the Russian government denied that the little green men operating on the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea were anything but local defense forces.
Russian President Vladimir Putin insisted they were not Russian troops.
After they seized the territory in a disputed referendum, wow, actually they were Russian special forces after all, who would have thought? And Crimea needed to be restored back to Mother Russia.
The day Biden arrived, Putin announced that Crimea was now part of Russia.
Crimea's government said voter turnout was strong throughout the peninsula, which is dominated by ethnic Russians who see the referendum as an opportunity to return Crimea home and to receive more economic support for an area dependent largely on tourism.
Deny, then justify. After taking Crimea in 2014, they said they were not interested in taking any more of Ukraine.
Don't believe those who intimidate you with Russia. Shout that other regions will follow after the Crimea. We don't want Ukraine's breakup. We don't need it.
They wouldn't have been lying, would they? In 2022, the Russians forcefully denied that their military buildup was anything more than training exercises.
And Russia still insists it has no intention of invading Ukraine.
Russia denies it was ever planning to invade Ukraine, despite amassing more than 100,000 troops near the border.
Although Moscow insists it has no plans to attack Ukraine.
Now they claim 5 regions of Ukraine as inseparable parts of Russia, undeniable and non-negotiable for historic and linguistic reasons.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has addressed a gathering in the Kremlin to announce the formal annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions.
Proclaimed as irreversibly part of Russian territory and to be defended by full force.
Deny, then justify. This is the guy Donald Trump looks up to. After a violent Trump-supporting mob attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6 to stop certification of the election, Trump's lawyers and supporters denied his responsibility because at one point he told the mob to go peacefully.
No thinking person could seriously believe that the president's January 6th speech on the ellipse was in any way an incitement to violence or insurrection. The president's remarks explicitly encouraged those in attendance to exercise their rights peacefully and patriotically.
But when he got into power again, he pardoned the violent rioters and called them patriots.
And the pardons include violent offenders who were charged with physically attacking police officers that day.
Now, the judges are granting these Justice Department requests. They're issuing these very strongly worded orders, and we cannot recast the events of January 6th in the way that President Trump has, trying to call it a day of love.
They were there with love in their heart. That was an unbelievable and it was a beautiful day.
Deny, then justify. In the case of annexing Canada, Trump doesn't even deny he wants to take us over. He just shies away from saying that he'll use military force.
Are you also considering military force to annex and acquire Canada?
No. Economic force.
And maybe he won't. It's hard to predict the future. But we can evaluate his character, record, and worldview to say that this is totally something he would do if he thought he could get away with it. Never rely on Donald Trump would never do that. Most countries don't warn you in advance when they're going to invade you. And fundamentally, you need to understand just how quickly things can go from he would never do that to he did it and he was right to do it. You need to accept the new reality. But people said he wouldn't do that. It will be about as helpful to us as the Russian government's initial denials are to Ukrainians now.
Although Moscow insists it has no plans to attack Ukraine.
Proclaimed as irreversibly part of Russian territory and to be defended by full force.